Everyone, Dev with Crime Hive, and in this true crime story, we're going to talk about the Emilie Morris case. And the reason I'm talking about this now, it's an older case, but it is being brought back to light. And really, if you're not familiar with this case, I will be going over the details to refresh you on what really happened. It's really bizarre. We have this girl right here at the time, Emilie Morris. She was coached by her track and cross country coach Jim Wilder here, and they developed an inappropriate relationship. And this is a tale really of sex abuse, and eventually she ends up confronting him with that abuse when she's older in life, and then she mysteriously dies, and it's still to this day considered suspicious. So we're going to talk about the details of that, and the reason I'm bringing this up specifically right now is because she died in 2014. It was on November 4th. So her anniversary for her death is coming near. And the second reason I wanted to cover this was because Oxygen is going to be doing a story on this. December 6th, it's going to air. So in a couple months, it's going to air to give you all the story. And so you can watch that later on as well. But this article here from BuzzFeed News, it starts out with "the case died with her," and that's really what we're going to talk about. We're getting into the details of this case, and I'll use this article as a reference. So before I get into it, again, this is Dev with Crime Hive. If you like these kind of true crime stories, just be sure to subscribe. If you do, hit the bell notification to all. That will give you all updates on this case and other cases that I'm covering. And, if you like it, share it, like it, and help support Crime Hive. So let's talk about this case here. Okay, and I'll be bouncing around through the article to give you guys a better understanding of this case. So when she was really a kid, we learn, she was crazy, she was funny, crazy funny, she was sharp, she was just this energetic kid, and she was an honor student when she went through school. She was considered an artist, and she went to a school in Missouri. This was called Lindbergh High School, and it was in the St. Louis County area. And she started doing track and cross country, and then she became coached by Jim Wilder. And this man, by all accounts, was very charismatic. He seemed to really hone into mentoring students, and seemed invested in their education and beyond that with their personal development. So he was coaching her, and really they began this close relationship in 1995, and that's when this relationship really started. So as we're going through here, we learn that this relationship takes a turn, and it gets into a sexual relationship where things begin to change. And so apparently the first time their relationship really crossed the line was one day. They were the team, the cross country team, was playing capture the flag, and she apparently had forgotten her workout clothes that day, and so she was sidelined, and she finds Coach Wilder, Jim Wilder, behind a tree, and she starts telling him about this boy who was playing the game chicken with her, and really seeing how far he could bring his hand up her leg, and so it was this children's game apparently called chicken. And Coach Wilder asked her if she wanted to play chicken, and so that's when this really begins. And so he ends up running his hand up her thigh, and then eventually into her crotch area, over her pants, and then was interrupted by some kid running by. So and that brings to another point here, as we'll learn here. It seems as if this affair that they had, keep in mind, Jim Wilder was married, had a kid. He was keeping this affair secret, but it seemed to be in the open. As we're learning through this article, through this story, you'll learn that people seem to know about this. There were kids that seemed to know, parents that knew. They even confronted the two with this allegation. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And so it leads down this path, though. from this game of chicken. And then after the practice, apparently he drives her home at the parents' request. So he goes in there, and apparently this is where things get a little sexual here, where he ends up performing oral on her, and after that moment, it was like a weekly thing. This apparently occurred weekly, where there was sex act after sex act occurring weekly at the school, away from the school, and they were just trying to keep it very secret. Now, she was 16 at the time, which is 1 year under the age of consent in Missouri. So every state's different. There's a lot of different laws that go into effect. And what we learn as we continue through the article is they were really pushing the boundaries. They were very reckless with this relationship, apparently. So apparently they were caught in the men's bathroom at one point at a park. Another time, Emilie was in Wilder's car, and a teacher came by, and he pushes her head down. I mean, they're really trying to keep this secret. They would meet in the wrestling room, and when people would come by, she would jump into the uniforms to hide. So those kind of things are going on, and it's just getting to a point where it's becoming consistent, and this is where we start to notice her behavior change. So she starts to become more withdrawn, and she starts to become more quiet. She's not this same energetic woman that she was, or the same girl that she was. She becomes a little bit more introverted, and really she becomes different, and students notice this. And in the meantime, as we continue through here, so apparently in 1996 in March, the principal, David Skillman, apparently had received a tip between the two with this inappropriate relationship, and they were sat down with them. So you've got Emilie and you've got Jim Wilder. They pretended like nothing had happened. They were stone-faced. They denied it. They said nothing happened between the two, and it kind of just ended at that. So they did look into it at some level. Keep in mind, this is back in 1996. Nowadays, if something like this were to happen, you certainly have much more involvement, and you're really, you've got more resources involved to make sure that nothing did in fact happen. And police are involved, a lot different than it was back then. So anyway, they deny it. The rumor, though, apparently had become very widespread. There were teammates, classmates, that it seems like everybody in the high school knew what was going on, and so there's really no denying those rumors, as it was true. I mean, that was actually going on. So as we continue through here, you can see how she was once vibrant and outgoing, and how she starts to change because of this secretive relationship. I mean, she's not really telling anybody about it. She starts having problems, mentally, emotionally. She apparently was belittled by the coach with photos she had, and he was saying, she needed to get a liposuction, and she's not a big woman. So I mean, he's belittling her and saying these things to her, and really affecting her mentally and emotionally. So she goes on this downhill spiral. After she graduates from high school, she actually ends up going to college, graduating from college, but she really struggles. And as we're looking through here to give you some ideas of those struggles, we learn that she had a dark time in college. She was depressed. She was having suicidal thoughts. Bulimia was involved with her. She wouldn't open up to her therapist. She was actually going to therapy, and everybody knew she had changed. They just couldn't really seem to figure it out or really understand what was going on. So all these things are happening, and she's basically a mess at this point. And she gets through college, and then we learn she ends up going back on the up and up. She becomes happy again. She gets married in 2007. She has 2 children, and she seems to be doing well. And then we learn in 2008, December 2008, Wilder was arrested for a report of a sexual contact with a current female student. So here we have another case. Keep in mind, Emilie never went forward to police. She kept this bottled inside. But this girl in 2008 accused Wilder, and he was actually arrested for it. Now, Wilder unfortunately was never convicted. The case was dropped, and it really didn't go anywhere. But this really kind of put back into perspective what had happened to her. So she didn't really reach out, though, even at that point. Keep in mind, people that are dealing with these traumatic issues of abuse, they don't often go forward, and it can take years, if they even come forward to police. So she really kept it to herself even after that incident. But that will help in her deciding to come forward, and that's what we learn about as we continue to go into this story and cover more details into it. Okay, and then as we fast forward, all right, she's struggling with alcoholism. She's really has this problem with alcohol, and you'll see why that's important later on too as we go through this story. She divorces her husband in 2012, and she ends up continuing through therapy, rehab, medication. Nothing sticks, apparently. She then, which is interesting, is she's getting drunk quite often. She starts telling her parents everything that Wilder had done. So, she gets to this point where she starts letting it out, and through therapy, her therapist says, you need to confront him. You need to confront him about this. That might make you feel better. And she was hesitant about it. But she finally, in the summer of 2013, decides she's going to go to the police, and she's going to talk about her experience with Wilder. And so what we learn from there, okay, so she then becomes motivated to go to police. And here's what we learned for some of those motivations. The fact that 2008 incident with another girl, that was one motivation. Another motivation was the therapist asking her to go forward to report this as a way to heal. And then she learned that a friend whose daughter played on a soccer team that Wilder helped train was involved in, part of the training was massaging the girl's legs. And so that rang bells to her as well. That was a red flag for her as well. And then she was also motivated by Wilder's behavior toward her. So they actually kept in touch every so often throughout her college years. They spoke, they kept in contact. And so the way he treated her, as if it was just this magical thing they experienced, he actually said it was energetic at one point. Or we'll learn some of the things. I'm actually going to show you the voice recordings that she secretly recorded of him to give you a better understanding. So she was motivated, is what I'm getting at, to come forward. So she does go to police. Luckily, these two detectives believe her, and I say that because unfortunately, a lot of times people will come forward with these allegations so many years later, and sometimes police don't believe it. They don't believe the story, or they just document it and they leave it be. They don't really put the effort into really investigating this type of crime. And I'm not saying that every police agency is like that, but unfortunately there's a huge backlog even of testing of the sexual assault kits. Huge backlog of kits have never been tested, and a lot of these cases do not go solved. So it's pretty tragic. But what happens is they believe her. They then recommend, after they've gotten all the reports, they recommend that she confronts him, and they were going to try to do it over the phone. She was going to call him over the phone and try to get him to admit that he had been sexual with her and sexually abused her and all these things. But we learned that Wilder's pretty aware of this. He's worried that the government might be trying to record him, and so he prefers to meet her in person. And so they meet in person. Even then, he's wondering, are you wearing a wire and all these things? But he ends up opening up to her, and she's recording this. She's got a secret microphone in her bra. She's recording the entire thing, and I'll show you the clips of what we learned through there. And so let me pull that up here. Okay, so we learn that July 2nd of 2013 is where she records Wilder secretly, and he was still employed by Lindbergh School as a high school running coach, and he was a middle school PE teacher. So he's still employed. They start talking, and then I want to play a few of these clips here as you see. So it's a rainy day. It's a Tuesday apparently, and I'm going to play you a couple of these recordings, and we'll go through each one just to show you how he's approaching this incident and what he has to say about it. And it's very good evidence. He calls this relationship electric. So let's talk about those. I'm going to play those here. Okay, here's the first one.
And it was weird because all of a sudden,
well, then that's
I'm a kid. But then there's that whole side of me that's, this kind of stuff, if we were the same age, would have been no problem. But now I had no idea. I felt like a flustery little kid because I did not know what to do, and I wasn't even. And then I was even beyond I'm the coach. I turned into flustery little kid. Like, I can't lose this, but I can't do that, but I can. But what? Like a shy guy would. But I'm not a shy guy. So it was really, I think it took me back to a whole different era all of a sudden. And then it was like electric. It was just like, oh my gosh, and it was just weird. And
so he's calling the relationship electric, and how he was like a little kid and he's shy and all these crazy things. Now we continue through to listen.
I feel so protective of you that I feel like there were times right off the bat even. I mean, we ignored it. We fought through it. There were times I did not want to do anything because I just didn't think it was what we should do, but we do it anyway. Yeah. And part of it, you're persuasive. And, do I want to make you mad? You get mad at me. And so like, okay, let's go. And it wasn't like it hurt. It was, I did enjoy the end result, but that I was in more protective mode.
So he's saying he enjoys the end result, said that she was persuasive, and then he said that they shouldn't do it, but they did anyway. He enjoyed it. I mean, he's certainly giving police information that could help in this case, but we'll learn why he was never convicted, and that's why I'm playing some of these videos here. So another one I'll play here. These are all really short clips here, but it gives you a pretty good idea of what happened.
Always in my mind is like, I wish anybody that knew our thing would know that there was no premeditation. Like, because we have to watch these. It's horrible. It makes me almost throw up every fucking beginning of school year. We have to watch those kind of videos.
Ew.
Yeah, and it's grooming and blah blah blah, and I'm like, you know what I mean? Because I just I've been there, but I didn't do that.
And then he almost talks about those videos that they play for the kids and the teachers about sex offenders and grooming behavior and all that kind of stuff, and he basically just plays it off like blah blah blah, not a big deal. And then I've got a couple more clips here as we're going through. Again, these are all really short here.
It's a weird deal because if you go 90% of the world, 15's legal. So if I go over and boff a 15-year-old in Spain, I can go all day in the streets, whatever, and nothing would happen. You touch a 16-year-old and you go to jail here. So is it, you know what I mean? And yes, I think I after having gone through it, I do think it's not right.
Okay, so he admits that it's not right. He knows he shouldn't be touching a 16-year-old, but then he tries to justify it almost by saying if he went to another country, like in Spain, he could do the same thing and everything would be fine. He wouldn't go to jail. So it's interesting to hear his mindset in this situation. And then here's another one.
Case, we did something that wasn't right according to our laws these days, right? But I'm not a creeper.
Okay, so I wanted to play those clips to give you a better understanding. And then what is so crazy about this is she takes all this information to police, and they actually have a case that they're working. And about November 2nd, 2014. So keep in mind, this was summer of 2013. All of a sudden, November of 2014, 6 months after that afternoon, that was the last day we hear from Emilie. She was dead, and we're going to talk about what happened and how she was found. And you guys can, let me know your thoughts on what you think happened? Do you think it was suicide? Keep in mind, she did have mental health problems. She had suicidal thoughts. She did have depression. She drank a lot. And when we look at the crime scene here, even with that information, knowing what here about her abuse and the case that was going forward, I'm curious about your thoughts on what you believe happened. And so Wilder's arrested that same month in 2013. And apparently, Emily's doing better. She's actually doing better with her drinking. She seems to be in a better mood. She's on this mission, it seems, that she finally thinks that justice is going to be served. And so she's on the right track. She seems to be doing well. And so people are just absolutely shocked to find her dead on the morning of November 4th. And it's pretty tragic because her father couldn't get a hold of her, ends up going to her apartment to check on her, and finds her in her pajamas, face down on the bedroom floor. And I'm reading from the article here, with a large trash can pulled over her head down to her shoulders. So her father picked up the trash can. Emily's body was cold. There was vomit in the plastic lining in the trash can and around Emily's face and head. And then on the floor next to her body was her phone and some snacks. She was apparently tucked into a blanket. And so, the police are called. Obviously, they're investigating this. And, what we learn is the cause of death was from asphyxiation from the plastic bag lining in the trash can. Now, this is what's interesting about this, though. They couldn't figure out what happened. They determined the death was suspicious. But what's crazy is her parents said that Emily was claustrophobic. And, even if she were to commit suicide, she would never put her head in a trash can or in the lining where she would feel claustrophobic. She would just never do something like that. Now, they did find an empty bottle of vodka nearby. We knew that she did have drinking problems, but she apparently had been on a great path lately, and she wasn't really drinking. So they actually did the toxicology test on her, and she only had 0.05% of alcohol. Keep in mind the legal limit, everywhere nationwide is 0.08. That's not much. It depends on the person. It could be 2-3 drinks, but she only had 0.05%. If she had drank the whole bottle of vodka, we'd be looking at a much higher percentage there. So they looked at that. Some people thought she drank herself to death. Some people thought, she just couldn't take the pain and trauma that she was currently dealing with, and couldn't move forward with this case that she was about to bring forward. And but she was so close. She literally had a meeting, and I'll tell you about it here in just a second. So police closed the investigation in January of 2015, and that was just 2 months after Emily's body was found. And so no suspects were named, still considered a suspicious death. And this court hearing, apparently Emily thought it was drawing to a close. They were going to maybe do a plea deal. She thought it was going to be coming to an end, and so she was looking forward to that. And then she's found dead. So it's very shocking and it's confusing. So what we learn about why they closed the case, as well as at Emily's funeral, just days after her death, they learned from a detective that the charges were dropped against Wilder. And the reason this was, and I'm going to pull this up here, is this is called the Confrontation Clause. And I'm looking at Cornell Law School here. The Sixth Amendment of the Constitution talks about this, that in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to be confronted with the witnesses against him. The clause was intended to prevent the conviction of a defendant upon the written evidence, such as depositions, affidavits, without the defendant having the opportunity to face his or her accusers and to put their honesty and truthfulness to test before the jury. So essentially what it's saying is, because Emily is dead, even though she had this evidence to bring to the court, she wasn't there to then be to be asked questions and to be cross-examined by the defense as to these allegations. So because of that, they literally dropped this case, and it's a pretty crazy law. I understand why they have it in place. There have been cases where you don't have a witness there in the courtroom, and the person is still convicted. So there's different cases, but anyway, they in this particular case they decided to drop the charges. So what that really means is after all that, this coach never was put on the sex offender registry list. So he's not a sex offender, still has his teaching license. Apparently he's not allowed to go back to the school he was at in Missouri, but he can still teach. He can, and he is not a sex offender. So curious on your thoughts about that aspect of it. And then as we continue through here, this is her mother. She still strongly to this day believes it was not a suicide, and she'll be on that special that I talked about with Oxygen. So I'd highly recommend watching that later when they air that. And then I'll wrap this up here with just a couple more things here. Okay, so again, just want to ask you all what you think about this case. Do you think her death was suspicious? Do you think it was not? Do you think maybe it was suicide? Do you think it was something else? Just curious about your thoughts below, and love the community here. Love the answers. It's a great community here at Crime Hive. And then the last thing I want to do again before we end this video is just end on something positive. Again, a lot of feedback on that. So from all the darkness of this story, just something a little light here that I found when the sun hits your laptop screen just right. I don't know about you all, but I always feel like I need to clean my laptop, my computer, when the sun touches it, and it looks similar to this. So anyway, wanted to end on something positive. Again, this is Dev with Crime Hive. I'll be back in another video. You all take care. Thanks.